A 30th birthday for Tour leader Miguel Indurain. His day posing no problems. In contrast, Tony Rominger, ill and weak, ends a hot day as another Tour casualty. Overall, Indurain now leads Richard Virenque, Armand de las Cuevas, Luc Leblanc and Vladimir Pulnikov. Of those who led the Tour in the first week, Chris Boardman has retired and the others rest between 55th and 87th overall. Hello again and welcome to the town of Castres in the south of France. Yes, a week is a very long time in the Tour, as those erstwhile leaders will testify. But yesterday we lost one of the great personalities, Tony Rominger, lying second overall. Tony Rominger last night took the unprecedented step of calling a press conference to say why he had abandoned the Tour de France. Gary Imlach now reports on what was for Tony a very sad day.
This was supposed to be the year that Tony Rominger finally took top place on the podium in Paris. But yesterday, it was clear from early on that he wouldn't even see the Champs-Élysées this year. By the end, there was only his close friend Jörg Müller riding with him. And after 183 kilometres, he finally gave in to the stomach bug he'd been carrying since the time trial to Bergerac on stage 9. Afterwards, it was an understandably subdued Rominger who faced the multilingual barrage that comes with being a Swiss rider on a Spanish team in the Tour de France.
Tony, a couple of questions in English. Can you explain the problems you had today?
It's not only today, it was already now, it's 3 days ago I had these problems, and I think the other 2 days, today I paid for that I have done the other 2 days that I was over my limits.
Can you sum up the disappointment that you feel at having to abandon?
No, you can't explain that. It's too harsh.
With the form that Indurain is showing, do you think you could have beaten him had you stayed healthy?
At that, I can't give an answer for that, because you never can compare how you were going last year and how you're going this year.
Now there's only next year for Tony to look forward to. Although at the age of 33, he may well have lacked his last chance of winning the Tour behind on stage 13.
And before the start, another top name gives up. Italian Gianni Bugno decides not to sign in. He didn't want to finish the Tour lowly placed and now says he will prepare for the World Championships in Sicily. For the rest, though, it's back on parade as the field threads its way through Castres.
Hot and humid all day today, a slight threat of storms later in the afternoon. At the start, the temperatures were in the low 30s, but high 35 this afternoon near the finish. And again, only a light wind to refresh the riders.
Well, on the first climb, the former leader of the King of the Mountains, Peter de Klerk, in the action again, and this time beating over the line the second-place rider, Richard Virenque, who wears the polka dot jersey. David Cassani of Italy was third. And Miguel Indurain content to ride in the main field, just a few seconds behind the early breakaways. Then it was on to the Col de la Fronfraude, 61 kilometres covered, and a break had established. In it was Rolf German, who was leading over the top of the climb ahead of the Australian Neil Stevens and Pascal Hervé. It was then a long way down to the valley below. And the breakaway that consolidated itself on the climb of the Col de Fronfraude, and that was at 61 kilometres, is still clear as we're running in now to the closing kilometres of the stage. It's been a marvellous day out for these 5 riders, and originally part of a 16-man breakaway which established after 35 kilometres of the stage, but since then these 5 have gone on by themselves, and they're riding very strongly indeed. At the moment, their lead over the field a massive 11 minutes. Rolf Sorensen, Pascal Hervé, Neil Stevens of Australia, Massimo Girotto and Rolf Yerman. And do you think, Paul, there's any chance we might get an Australian stage win?
Well, Neil Stevens has got a big chance of taking the stage today, but the only danger, I think, to him is the fact that there are 2 riders from the same team in that front group of 5. That's Rolf Yerman from the GB team and Rolf Sorensen as well. So those 2 riders have more chance to manoeuvre when we get near to the finish, but it would be a great victory for the young New Zealand rider if he could the young Australian rider if he could steal the show.
Well, look, we've just got Emmanuel Magnin here. He was involved in a bit of a tumble, I think, earlier on today. We've had 1 or 2 crashes again, but let me tell you about, more importantly, there's been a massive case of fallout in the Tour de France today. We have heard of more than 12 riders abandoning the race today, and some big names among them. Apart from the fact that Gianni Bugno didn't start, it was revealed later that Edwig van Hooijdonk didn't start, along with the Spaniard Roberto Sierra. And then came a long list of riders who, as they progressed through the heat, of the south of France, they all started stopping on the right of the road. Mario Sierra, the champion of France, Jackie Durand has gone. The Lanterne Rouge, the last man in the race we spoke to yesterday, and he told us then he was feeling great. Well, Marco Vermi is now out of the race. The big German hope, Eric Zabel and Bart Voskamp from Holland, amongst others, and the most important retirement, 11th place overall, the Russian rider Pavel Tonkov. And I'm sure we'll hear of more by the time these riders get down to the finish. And it's the heat that's doing it, Paul.
Well, it really is. This has been one of the hottest tours I can remember. Only one in my memory was hotter than this one. That was the 1983 Tour de France, which was really very difficult for the riders. Then the French call it the canicule, which is a real heat that comes down here that you can hardly breathe at all. It is so heavy, the air, and the riders here have paid for that this year. It's been tough since the first week of the Tour de France, and people are really tired, which is why there have been so many crashes. Once the riders get tired in this kind of heat, they lose their reflexes, and that's why there have been 1 or 2 crashes already today. Even the French rider, the Castres riders, went down a little bit earlier.
That's right. Well, this breakaway took their chance early on. They planned a long, hot day in the saddle, that is for sure. Oh, and there's a mass crash here. This is further, well, we were just remarking on the crashes here, and there's a lot of riders gone down in this pile-up back in the field, and it looks as though Jens Heppner, the champion of Germany, has hit his head on the road there. And Jens has got a little cut over the eye, but Gerard Porte, the doctor, is right with him. And alongside, too, it looks like Raul Alcala, who is standing there from Motorola.
This is the kind of thing that can happen, you see, Phil. It is so hot out there. The riders' reflexes are going all the time, and it looks to me as if Heppner is in a very bad way here at the moment. The doctor's going to check him out, make sure that there's no concussion. The mechanic there at the moment, changing the bike, making sure that everything's in ship-shape order. He's straightening the handlebars, but he stayed down for quite a long time. Raul Alcala has obviously had a problem with his front wheel there. You see the mechanic is quickly there to change it and get him on his way again. But this is the main problem here with the heat. The riders' reflexes are going, and they lose a little bit of concentration, a touch of wheels, and you're on the ground.
Well, I'm sorry for Jens, because he's having a good tour, and he rides for the German Telecom team. Now, the doctors here will get him on his way if he can, but they always are very cautious about a head injury, and they might not allow him to restart. We'll keep you up to date with that if we hear anything from the race report. Back up to the front, and this is now the breakaway. Pascal Hervé leading the pack on the way, and they're holding on to that gap. And let's have a look at the pack again. Here's what happens right in the middle. In fact, it's Heppner who dodges wheels. He gets caught at the back.
What actually happened there, Phil, was as he came through the pack, he hit a water bottle that must have been dropped by one of the other riders, and that took his front wheel from underneath him, and he went straight down. And because there are no reflexes, half a dozen other riders came down with him. You can see the water bottle on the right-hand side of the screen there. That was the thing that caused the crash there.
And here we are back with the picture of Jens Heppner on the road, and the race still passing by him. And I would think, Paul, that they will ask Heppner to abandon the tour here. So the field are on the way again. The gap is still 11 minutes, and it's not really a question of will they stay away today, but which one of those 5 will win. So as Jens Heppner gets set to ride on again in the Tour de France, and we'll join Gary Imlach, who's now going to tell us about a very unusual spectator who follows the tour.
You know, we've always had characters on the tour. A couple of years ago, it was the Panasonics, the Dutch couple who made endless cups of tea on the bleakest stretch of every stage. Then there was the man, of course, who drove the motorised profiterole for a living. But this year, there's only one character on the tour, and here he is, the devil, or since he's German, der Teufel. Teufel.
Hello.
Guten Tag.
Hello.
Now, since my German's as good as his English, I can't really get to the depths of what he's all about. But I can say that he is the strangest character we have ever met in our coverage of the Tour de France. Was magst du hier?
Ja, ich bin hier begeistert von den Leistungen der Fahrer und versuche hier anzufeuern und richtig noch einen draufzulegen, noch die richtigen Endspurt zu verleihen hier.
Well, the gist of all that is that the devil, or Didi Senft as he's known back home in Berlin, is a bit of an enthusiast, which, let's face it, hardly needs translating. Anyone prepared to put on red tights and horns and wave a trident at passing traffic for 3 weeks is clearly a complete enthusiast. And once you've got accustomed to the sight of a 42-year-old German with a 6-foot tail made out of an old inner tube, there's the question of the bike, a monstrous construction with 30 footballs on each wheel. After Indurain, he's possibly the most photographed figure on the Tour too. Despite his popularity, though, it has to be said that on the evidence of this performance, the devil does not have all the best tunes. There's no doubting his commitment, though. From Dover to Paris, he's at every stage, sleeping at night in his car and living off supplies from passing tour vehicles.
Hier ist mein Bett. Da drin und dann...
The Devil sees each stage through to the bitter end, and after charitably passing up the opportunity to take the hindmost, hitches up his huge bike, packs away his tail, and heads off happy at another diabolical day's work on the roadside.
Well, thanks a lot, Gary, and it certainly takes all sorts to support the Tour de France. Well, back with us now, and with the same fiver away, but going down the right of the road, Neil Stephens has gone. Now, we expected an attack. We've just gone under, in fact, the 20 kilometres to go banner, and the rider taking up the chase is Rolf Sorensen. So they've two members of the GB squad here. Sorensen is one, Yerman is the other. And as these two riders get it together now, it looks as though Yerman will have to play the support role at the back.
Well, definitely they do. This is the only way that their riders could react. They had to try and split up the two GB riders. Unfortunately, Rolf Sorensen is the one that's got away there. Now Rolf Yerman will be the one who plays a defensive role behind. And Massimo Girotto and Pascal Hervé have got to get themselves together to try and pull them back. As we can see now already, Rolf Sorensen working and contributing to the success of this breakaway with Neil Stephens. But it's not such a good move for Neil Stephens because Rolf Sorensen is much far the superior sprinter.
Well, it was marvellous for Australia if they could get a stage win. It's a couple of years since Phil Anderson got the last one. He's been the regular man to fly the flag for Australia in this chase. But on a day when Neil Stephens is attacking for the win today, down in the field, we're sad to say that Patrick Jonker has given up the race today, the newcomer on the Nova My team. And in fact, we now have 15 riders have stopped in the Tour today, and 3 haven't started, so 18 men out of the Tour de France today. That's not a record, but my goodness me, it's a lot of men. Well, the breakaway has been established now. Rolf Sorensen here having a little bit of difficulty coping with the speed of the Australian Neil Stephens. We're actually in Montpellier, but the race makes a long tour of the city before it finally comes to rest at the finishing line, and at the moment we're about 8 kilometres from the line. And this is a tremendous breakaway because in just a few short kilometres they've gained over a minute on the other 3 riders in this breakaway, and they're holding it around 6-7 minutes on the main field. So there's no doubt now, Paul, one of these two is going to win the day.
Definitely, that was an excellent move by Stephens when he jumped away down the wrong side there. And in fact, Rolf Sorensen reacted straight away, so he's obviously the fresher of the 2 GB riders. At the moment, Neil Stephens looks to me as if he's very, very strong, and he's the strongest of the 2. As I've said before a couple of times, Rolf Sorensen is a very clever rider, and you have to very clever to outfox the Australian.
Well, neither of these two have won a stage in the Tour de France before. Sorensen came here for a real shot at the overall classification. That's sort of slipped a bit now. Stephens came here to help Laurent Jalabert, the team sprinter, who we remember crashed on that very first day, and he's still in hospital with facial injuries, but recovering well. And now he was saying we don't really know who to work for anymore now, and it was rather like a headless team. But now he's having a go for himself, and now I wonder what he's saying here, Paul.
Well, that's a tough man for Retty. He's come up to talk to him about Stephens. He told him that time gap now is well over 1 minute. Rolf Yerman is not chasing behind, so we're in the strong position. You don't have to work too much with the Australian rider. You have to win. It's your responsibility for the team to win, because there were 2 of you in a 5-man breakaway, and sometimes that can go against you.
Well, let's hope that Neil doesn't overwork at this moment, because when Sorensen thinks he's got him nicely softened up, he'll jump him and try to make it to the line first. I just have the feeling that Neil is actually riding within himself today, and riding very, very well indeed. This hot day coming to an end, leaving behind a trail of devastation in today's Tour de France, with so many riders giving up, including the stage winner a few days ago, Jackie Giron, the champion of France. He's gone now as we go under the 5 kilometres to go.
It's a very, very nervous moment in the race now, because both of these 2 riders realise that they've got the victory just in their hands, but one slight mistake and that can be robbed from you. Stephens was wondering at the moment, how can I outfox Rolf Sorensen? He's the better rider. He'll be a little bit worried by the fact that Sorensen has a great reputation, but on the other hand, Sorensen was beaten in a 2-man sprint this year in the Tour of Italy by Massimo Girotto, who's not a very good sprinter, and he was too overconfident. So I think he'll be worried a little bit at the moment about the fact that he's going into a two-man sprint.
Well, Stevens is more an opportunist rider than a sprinter as well. I remember him winning a stage at the milk race a few years ago when he rode for an anonymous professional team, and they called themselves the Zero Boys because nobody would put any words into the circle they rode on their jerseys. But since then he has found himself a place on the best teams in the world, and has been well worth it too, because he is the strong man coming towards the end of the stages when he can set the pace. And today, let's hope he can set it to himself for a stage victory. He deserves that.
And he's an extremely respected rider in the Once squad, because at the end of last season they actually did a little bit of cleaning out and got rid of one or two riders, and one man they didn't want to get rid of. Despite all his injury problems with his collarbone and his hernia operation, etc., they had a lot of faith in Neil Stevens and kept him on the squad.
Now Sorensen clearly now wanting to do just enough and not too much. 4 kilometers for the two leaders and 5 kilometers for the three chasers. So there are 1 kilometer separating them. They're not going to bridge that gap in what remains.
Well, that distance gives them roughly, I would say, 1 minute and 20 seconds. And Sorensen is very, very nervous at the moment. You see every possibility he gets. He looks over his shoulder to see how far behind those other riders are. He's been tightening up his shoes just to make sure that they're nice and tight for when it comes to the sprint. So he's thinking about the sprint, but all the time he's checking out on Neil Stevens. If Stevens makes a mistake now, Sorensen will try and jump.
Just look at this crowd here, the far end of the course. I think we might go all the way around this roundabout and then go down the other side on our way back. And that'll leave us just on 2.5 kilometers to go to the finish. And then both riders will spot the other three chasers. They'll both know the distance that exists now between them, and that could work in either one's favor. Right now, Neil Stevens, who started the attack a long time ago today, they've been away for around about 165 kilometers. The breakaway was 16 strong, and then 5 men projected themselves from that, and those 5 are now down to 2.
It's always Stevens who has to make the effort to force Sorensen to come to the front. He's not a volunteer in the work that's being done at this stage of the game. It really is a nervous time. The tension is building. We go under now, 3 kilometers to go. In about 4 minutes' time, we'll know if the little Australian rider will be able to get the victory, and they can look across to the other side of the dual carriageway there and see the 3 chasers.
And there they are, so they know the gap, and they know the gap is good enough now, so now we might see a little bit of cat and mouse tactics here. These are the 3 chasers, these are the 2 leaders. This must be one of the longest pursuit races up and down the carriageway we've ever seen. Now Stevens takes a good close look at Rolf Sorensen and immediately slots into his slipstream. Neither rider doing more than they have to do now just to hold the lead. Look at this now.
But I tell you, Phil, looking at Neil Stevens, he looks extremely fresh. He's a tough rider. He's a man who can react to the conditions. It's been a very hard Tour de France this year. We've talked so much about the heat, riders not being able to recover. And Neil Stevens is one of the tough men who can keep going in all conditions.
Well, Phil Anderson was the last Australian to win a stage of the Tour de France. He did it at Quimper back in 1991. And now can Neil Stevens emulate him?
It's going to be a very close sprint, I think, when it comes to the line. And always Stevens is having to force Sorensen to come through. And he gets a little look at him just to check. The 2 kilometer banner there is just in front of him. It's not very far to go. Sorensen now looking for his gears, deciding which gear he's going to sprint. He will have read last night in his book what the situation is, what the final sprint is like, if it's uphill or downhill, and he's going to try and make sure that he's in the right gear now, possibly wind it up with 300 or 400 meters to go. But you see, he's gone to the back, and Stevens again having to force him through behind. This is Rolf Jährmann, the man who is the teammate of Rolf Sorensen. He has nothing to do but act as a policeman.
Now the time gap is still going up, so they've no fears from the back. 1 minute and 33 seconds to these 3 chasers here. And I hope our camera stays with these 2 now, because any second now I feel one of them will launch an attack and try and make a run for the finish. The only shame is, in many ways, that this isn't the finish for the whole pack today, because this is a beautiful finish for the sprinters. It's long, straight, and sweeps round to the line, but the road not very wide. Sorensen goes through. Stevens watches him every time. And those shadows on the road, you know, could play an important part in deciding this stage, because that's what they'll look for. I think if Neil needs to attack, he must attack on the right to keep his shadow out of the corner of the eye of Sorensen. But he's not worried at the moment. He's gone through. Pascal Hervé having his last shout before the finish.
Well, the chase has definitely gone out of that group there. The The white bridge you can see over the road there is 1 kilometre to go, the red kite as they call it. If I was in Neil Stevens' situation here, what I would do is try and force Rolf Sorensen to come to the front, which is exactly what he's doing. He realises that Sorensen is an extremely good sprinter, so if he can start from the back, it puts the pressure on Sorensen, and now we have a track situation where these two riders are trying to force the other one to go to the front. Sorensen's nervous.
Sorensen is extremely nervous, and in fact, you know, they'll run them down for that minute and a half if they waste too much time. Stevens knows that. He's building it up again. He's riding tight on the barriers to force Sorensen to move through the inside of him so he can see him come.
Well, Sorensen's a very cold man there. You see as it slowed down, he put the brakes on just to make sure that he would stay behind Stevens. There's no way he wants to go in front. On the other side of the road, there is the main field, getting a very rare chance to have a ringside seat to the finish of a stage of the Tour de France here. But still, it's Stevens at the front. Sorensen's forcing him to stay there. He wants to come out of his slipstream. But Stevens is a good track rider. He knows this kind of tactic, and he's waiting for every last moment. He's twitching at the moment, waiting for the time when he has to react.
Well, it's always sad for the rider who finishes second, but that's the best bike race in the world. Somebody has to do that. And look at that, he saw Sorensen look the other way, and he launched off very quickly indeed. That's a good move by Neil Stevens, but now he's got a long way to go, and he's right to sit up, I think. He took his chance because he saw Sorensen looking, but now Sorensen has got Stevens in the front, and Stevens is going to have to kick again here as he comes up to the finish now, because Sorensen will wait and stay in his slipstream. So again now Sorensen will come, and this time Sorensen takes on Neil Stevens. Stevens takes his slipstream in the hope he can come again. As Sorensen now winds up for the finish. Stevens has got some strength left. He's trying to come again. They're going into the home straight now. Stevens still giving it a lot of speed there, but I think on the line, no doubt about it. In fact, as Sorensen held it right to the line there to beat Neil Stevens, and the Australian takes second place ahead of Rolf Sorensen of Denmark. The Danes are now having a marvellous tour indeed. That's their third stage win of the tour, and in fact 1 week ago to the very day we had Bo Hamburger score their first for Denmark. And what a weekend they've had, with Bjorn Riis winning yesterday. Now we go back to the race for third place here, and we've got to the back Miss Massimo Girotto, who beat Sorensen, as Paul Sherwin told us, in the stage of the Tour of Italy this year. Rolf Yerman, winner of the Amstel Gold Race a year ago, and a good sprint finisher too, and Pascal Hervé having a shot at his highest finish in a Tour de France stage as well. Hervé has the advantage. Yerman, well, I don't know. Hervé's going to go first and see what happens. In fact, Yerman very slow to react. Girotto sitting in the slipstream there, going with Yerman, as now through on the rails here on the right. Here comes Hervé, but I think Yerman has got the speed. And watch out for Girotto. If he's got anything left at all, he's got to make it now, but they're not going to do it. And so the teammate of Rolf Sorensen, Rolf Yerman, gets third place, Girotto fourth, and in fifth place, Pascal Hervé.
Were you worried all the way to the line because you looked a little bit twitchy with Neil Stevens there? Were you thinking about the stage in the Tour of Italy?
Yeah, I was. So long time since I've been winning. Won the first race this year, like William, since I've had a lot of infortunes. And I was very afraid that he would beat me too. I know I'm a lot faster, but then a sprint with two is always difficult. So I've learned from my mistake with Girotto, and I pulled the sprint.
Rolf is, you probably know, he's a bike rider with a lot more class than me, a lot more talent in the sprint. He was doing some pretty slow turns near the finish, and I just said, oh, listen, get to the finish and we'll work it out there, you know, but he didn't see it that way anyway. We had to get a bit of a go today. We'll try it again another day.
And here's the big pack now coming up towards the line, fighting out for sixth place. And the green jersey, Jamaldin Abdul-Jabbarov, a little bit trapped about 4 men back. Jan Ferrada's in front of him, but no, he's got through on the inside. And a fantastic finish here by Abdul-Jabbarov just to round off another good day for him in that chase for green. Abdul-Jabbarov going first. Ferrada coming through on his shoulder, doesn't get it on the line. And Martinello just behind both of them. The three great sprinters turn on the style once more, although it was only for sixth place today. Sorensen in a time today of 5 hours, 11 minutes and 4 seconds in the intense heat, outsprinting Neil Stevens of Australia. A minute and 13 seconds back. Sorensen's teammate Rolf Yerman leads home the other escapers of the day. Jamaldin Abdul-Jabbarov brings the field in some minutes behind, but overall no change at all. Miguel Indurain leads by exactly the same margin he had this morning, because he finished alongside Richard Virenque Armand de las Cuevas, Luc Leblanc and Vladimir Pulnikov. But on a day when the sun was the real challenger of this year's Tour de France, 18 riders have given up the race. Until tomorrow, when we go into the heat of Provence and on probably the hottest mountain in France, Mont Ventoux, I'm Phil Liggett saying goodbye.